James, thank you very much for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks very much for having me along today. I'm James Murray. I'm the MP for Ealing North. So I've been the MP since December last year, which means I've had an unexpected first 9 months. I spent more of my time as an MP meeting people from at a desk like this than I have face to face, which has been a real shame to not be able to meet people face to face. But I'm really pleased that I'm invited along today to meet all of you here today. Housing is absolutely at the heart of why I'm in politics. Before I was an MP, I worked for Sadiq Khan as his Deputy Mayor for Housing. And before that, I was a cabinet member for Housing at a council for 6 years. So for me, housing, the private rented sector, new council housing, homelessness, all of the issues connected with housing really are at the heart of what drives me in politics. So when I was asked to come along and contribute and be part of this meeting today, I was really pleased. And so thank you very much for having me and look forward to working with you all in future.
Lovely, thanks for joining us. Jason?
Hi, Jason Martin here from Cap Enterprise. Apologies for the late arrival. I had to whiz up the road from Hastings. Yeah, I'm one of the trainers on the program. My background is in first part of my career was private sector. Second part of my career was a community-led initiative, and from that I've moved into sort of business support, specialist business support within the sector, delivering training to voluntary sector organisations across the whole of the south of England. And my area of expertise, most recently working with the Lloyds Bank Foundation, is helping organisations to diversify their income. But in order to do that, there are certain skills and techniques and strategies that need to be adopted, which will be incorporated in the training program that we're delivering. So I've been in the sector for just coming up to 20 years. And yeah, I've loved every minute of it, but I'm terrified by the challenges that are coming up over the next few years. But I'm absolutely optimistic about the ability of the sector to embrace those challenges and come up with a solution. So yeah, excited to be part of the project.
Thank you. Yusuf? Yusuf, you're on mute.
My name is Mr. Yusuf Guled. I work with Horn of Africa Disability and Elderly Association, and disability of all ages, and I can see familiar faces with me, although I've been locked down with shielding for a very long time, and this is an opportunity for me to join you and see how things is with other people outside my room. It's an opportunity. And then I also, I'm also a trustee to a number of other charities, as has been mentioned by the moderator of the program. So I'm happy at least to have a moment with you and share some of our community's experiences in this topic today.
Lovely, thank you. And Shelley, you just got back to your seat. Perfect timing. You can just say very quick who you are and a little bit about your organisation.
Thank you, Toby. Hello, everybody. My name is Shelley Chahal, and I run a not-for-profit organisation based in Southall. Apologies for my late arrival. I basically work with people who come from the disadvantaged sector collectively. Networking, advisory, advocacy, all kinds of whatever issues turn up, try to manage. Housing is a big issue in our local area, and I'm really obliged to Toby for setting up this Zoom meeting. If I may address Mr. Murray particularly, please, because he is a local MP, with a request that obviously not going to be able to explain everything here. Don't want to waste everyone's time. But the issues that have come to my door will be affecting his voters, probably already are, but certainly will in the future. And that relates to elderly or disabled homeowners. And I know that might not be very sort of popular, because, you know, it's the rented sector which is more akin to the third sector. But they are voters, they are people who are struggling, they are people in need, and there is a dire issue affecting them which needs to be addressed and has long been ignored, and that relates to planning departments and how they handle planning applications where there is a medical or impairment need. And I am campaigning on this, please, and that's really my
Okay,
issue.
lovely. We can talk about all this a little bit more. I'm just going to whiz through, because I'm aware of time, whiz through the introductions, and then I'm going to talk about the project, and then James is going to speak, but we'll come back to your points. Okay.
Thank you.
So, Hebo, would you like to just introduce yourself? And thank you very much for attending. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Hibor Sama. I'm Housing Forum Officer. Hi, Sufyan. We met a couple of times. I support housing and non-housing resident in the borough of Hounslow. This is I'm a part of a community engagement team in Hounslow. Our working closely with Toby to support this board in terms of linking with our TRAs, groups such as Big Loco and other resident associations in the borough. That's pretty much.
Okay, lovely. We're going to hear more from Hebo in a little bit.
Yes.
So we've just got a few more people to introduce. So Rena, would you like to say hello? Haven't got your picture.
Hi. Yep. So I'm just someone who lives in the borough, and I've started a local community organisation centred around boosting education and involvement in political processes. A lot of problems where I live in Southall is that a lot of people don't know about the processes or how they can have a voice in them. So my organisation is about bridging that gap and actually showing people they have a voice and that can be heard in the process if they know how to do it. So
brilliant. You're exactly the sort of people we want to engage with. So thank you very much for joining. And Shamaki, would you like to say hi?
Shamaki here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, thanks.
Sorry, my camera is working properly. So I'm from Gossard, but also I work sometimes supporting other groups in Ealing. And so Gossard does a lot of different projects, working with over 1,500 people within Ealing. And housing is a big issue. And we have a lot of case studies that can be turned into campaigns. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Akima?
Hi, I'm Akima Fraser-Bailey. I am the regional head of housing for Nottingham Housing, and I cover Ealing and Hounslow. So I'm really interested to hear about the steps that you're about to take and how we can feed into this project as well.
Lovely. Thanks for joining us. And last but not least, Joy Barton. Joy? No, maybe she'll come back in a minute and say hi. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an overview of the... Oh, you there?
I was clicking on the wrong thing. Right. Hi, everyone. My name's Joy. I work for a charity called PESTS, which stands for Parents of Ealing Self-Help Training Scheme. We support parents of children with disabilities living in Ealing, and we offer information, support and advice on a range of issues, housing being one of the main topics, but it can be anything, anything that we can support them with.
Okay, lovely, thanks. Right, so I'm aware that we're a little bit over time already, so I'm going to give a quick overview and then pass on to James. So just to give an overview of the project, it's 2 years and it is funded by the Trust for London, part of the Good Homes and Neighbourhood Fund, about advocacy for campaigning for housing in Ealing and Hounslow. So we'll be working both with community groups and also with tenants and residents associations and individuals. So we're really aiming to empower the individuals and give the groups the training and the tools they need to be able to help those individuals. So we will be working with across both boroughs and with those groups and individuals. And so training that we're providing is open to all of them. I'm really aware that because of COVID now that everything has gone online. So I'm really hoping that people who join the program or interested in the program share information about it and awareness to those who are digitally excluded. It's just unfortunate at this point in time that there might be people with very some excellent views and initiatives and enthusiasm, but are excluded through digital exclusion. So I'm really hoping if you could all share share information about this project and also bring their views from you into this. And that's one of the things I'm going to be asking when we do a new survey with this great software that I found that records individuals speaking. People are getting really fed up with so many surveys, and they can record it, even translates from community languages, and it can upload simple little video clips and enables people to put their point of view across rather than typing. But also I do want in the surveys to get some real specifics that we can then talk to the councils about their policy and make steps towards changing. So I think it's good to have a combination of people being able to tell us what their needs are and hear their voice, but also some specifics that we can then look at in regards to changing policy. Now we are going to be having a community advisory board, and I'm delighted that James has agreed to be the chair of this. And I've also been wooing people from different organisations to be part of it too. We'll meet on a quarterly basis. People I've already wooed are people like Kelvin from Cape, because I think it's really important to hear about the voice of people facing mental health issues and the issues they face with housing. During lockdown, Kelvin and I were both looking at charities who were dealing with that in Ealing and Hounslow, and we couldn't find any whatsoever. So I think it's really important to do that. But anyone who's interested in joining this community board are very welcome. And I just want to show you very quickly I'm going to share the screen. We've got a page on our website, and it is, so this is our page on our website that we really want to promote, ehcvs.org.uk/housing campaigning. There's some information about this project, and there's a video from me explaining it. And if you click on this, it takes you to Slack. Now Slack is a work site which in this place, once you join it, you can invite anyone else to join. And in this, we're going to store all our training, all our papers from the meetings. So basically, if someone wanted to join this program 6 months, 12 months down the line, they can go in here, they can see, review all the training. It's going to store everything. There's even, you can search for resources. You can even chat to different people. But here, this is basically the central place for this project. And I'm hoping that people can represent the voice of people who aren't able to get online to see this. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this will be developed over time. But if you can, please join. I will send a link out on this page that I produced on our website, and you can, this is open for a couple more weeks, but people can always join this Slack website. But it's going to be a really important place that we can all share information and see how this project is developing and moving forward, and making sure that there are some goals and objectives and outcomes from this project, and share information. Right, and that is a lot of me talking then. So now we are a little bit behind. So I am going to pass over to James, who I gave him a very wide remit, but I thought it was so interesting to hear about his experience as the Deputy Mayor for Housing and his insight into affordable housing for the BAME and vulnerable people in Ealing. So over to you, James.
Oh, thank you. And it's always nice to be given a nice broad topic to speak on, because it means I can talk about whatever I like, which is great. But I hope I won't bore you today. But I just want to set out a few thoughts about where I'm coming from in terms of housing, the situation I think we all face, and why this project is so important. You know, from my point of view, if I cast my mind back over the last few years, it's sometimes hard to narrow down what the priorities are in terms of housing, because sometimes the housing crisis people face feels so broad, it feels so big, and it also affects different people in different ways, which I think is a really important point when we're talking about it. Certainly when I'm talking about it as an MP, or we're talking about it politically, we need to remember that some people experience a very severe housing crisis, but other people are actually very well housed at the moment. And so there's a real difference in how it affects different people and in different groups. But when I was at City Hall, the top things that I was really keen to focus on, and we did focus on as an administration, was firstly building more council housing to make sure that we had that genuinely affordable housing. I think the number of times when I said the word affordable, and people very fairly looked at me skeptically, sometimes rolled their eyes, because the term affordable has been misused and used wrongly by the government for so many years. People don't trust the word affordable. So we very much put a focus on building new council housing, by which we mean council homes for social rent, because that's what people can genuinely afford and what people know and trust. And the second thing, and this is notwithstanding Shelley's very good point earlier on, was around the private rented sector, because I think that when people live in social housing, or when people are owner-occupiers, there are problems that they have certain levels of security which people in the private rented sector just don't have. And for me, one of the big changes, particularly somewhere like Ealing, actually, somewhere like Ealing almost more than anywhere in London, is the change in the private rented sector over the last few years. Because I think when I grew up in Ealing, you know, when I was a kid 30 odd years ago, a lot of the homes across Ealing were owned by families, whereas a lot of them now have become owned by investors, rented out, sometimes subdivided, and the whole nature of the housing stock in Ealing and across London more widely, I think has changed quite a lot. So the private rented sector now isn't somewhere where people live for a short period of time before getting a tenancy with the council or buying a home. It's somewhere where people can end up living for their whole lives, raising a family and living into old age. And again, I don't want to in any way cut across Shelley's point about older people who live in owner-occupied housing, but I think older people living in private rented housing is going to become a bigger and bigger issue for us in the future, because as people's income goes down when they get older, but they're still expected to pay rent and live with no security or very little security, that's a huge problem we've got to face. And the third aspect of what I've been focusing on for the last few years is about homelessness. And I use the term homelessness very specifically rather than rough sleeping, because I think rough sleeping is something which has gone up hugely in recent years. It's the most visible form of homelessness. It is outrageous what's happened, and people are right to be outraged. I think what I'm always keen to emphasise is that as well as rough sleeping, there is a huge number of people who are more hidden in their homelessness, and that people on this call, we all are aware of them, but the general public quite often associate homelessness with street homelessness, with rough sleeping, rather than understanding the broader impact of homelessness, whether that's people living on couches for many months or years, people moving around all the time, not having somewhere secure to live. So that again is going to impact a huge number of people in Ealing and across London. And if you look at those three issues I've mentioned, so council housing, private rented sector and homelessness, they were all big issues even before COVID came along. What we've seen with the COVID outbreak in relation to these housing issues, as with all other issues across society, is it's really exposed the inequalities which already existed for everyone to see. So again, people on this call, I suspect we all knew very much the inequality that existed even before COVID happened. But I think for the wider public, some people who weren't maybe as aware of how deep the inequality really is in some parts of society, COVID has really brought that to the fore, because if people are asked to work at home, if they live in a nice home which they own and has a garden and a spare room, they've had a hugely different experience than people who live in overcrowded accommodation, insecure private renting, or some form of homelessness. And it's really brought that inequality, that divide in society, right up into the open, so that no one can ignore it. And one of my jobs as an MP, working in Parliament with other MPs in the opposition, is to make sure that as we begin to move out of lockdown, as we begin to get through COVID, the government does not forget, and is not allowed to forget, that those inequalities exist, because the country's attention is on those inequalities now. We need to make sure that we build back better, after the COVID outbreak, and that real change real change happens, whether that's building more affordable housing, reforming the private rented sector, or helping get people into secure homes and off the streets. So all of that has really been brought to the fore by COVID. And I think one of the other issues which has been brought to the fore by COVID, as I said earlier on, COVID has not had an equal impact on everyone. It's one of the complexities behind some of the language which is used to talk about COVID. People say, oh, it's affected everyone across society. Yes, it's true, it has affected everyone across society, but it hasn't affected everyone the same. It's affected some people very differently. And one of the issues which we know has been very pronounced and has really come out against, definitely, particularly somewhere like Ealing, is the impact on the BAME community, and the impact it's had in terms of people getting unwell, in terms of people dying, and the impact on our communities. And I think that's something which is exposed, again, an inequality which we need to understand and we need to address. And I think that more broadly, as I said earlier, we need to make sure that those inequalities, when it comes down to the impact on the BAME community, if that's exposed existing inequalities, we need to make sure the government does not then forget them as we start moving out of this crisis. So those inequalities are addressed, and that improvements, long-term improvements, sustainable, proper improvements to society are made on the back of this awful experience that everyone has been through. For me, giving a voice to community groups and to tenants representatives in forming housing policy is the way to make better housing policy. When I was at City Hall, we were very keen on involving community groups and residents and tenants in helping devise our policy. And I don't think I'm telling any secrets to say that some of the officers at City Hall, as I say, I'm not going to name them and get any in trouble, but some of them were a little cautious about involving tenants quite so much, because they said, well, how do we know how this is going to end up? This is a big process. It's going to be quite confusing. Lots of different opinions are going to come forward. And I thought, well, that's great, because we are here to represent people. We've got to listen to it. Yeah, sure, we're not going to please everyone, but actually, if we've engaged everyone and listened really carefully, and then even if we don't accept everyone's views, we explain why we've chosen a particular path, I think you can then build trust. Whereas if people, no matter how well trained they are, sit in an office on the Thames and come up with a plan of how to fix the housing crisis, they're never going to come up with solutions that are as good as they would be if they had involved tenants. And that really happened to me. That was a real experience that I had being there at City Hall when we were developing our policy around estate regeneration, for instance, where there's a very strong feeling from many communities affected by estate regeneration to have a bigger say, which led to us introducing the condition about having ballots, having referendums on estate regeneration plans before they went ahead. That's where we came up with a number of plans in the planning policy at City Hall about prioritising social housing in planning decisions. And it's also where a lot of our policies came from around supporting cooperative housing and community-led housing and housing for different groups who wanted to build their own homes in their own local areas. So for me, the value of including different communities, tenants, residents, local representatives is absolutely clear. What I think is vital to make that a reality, and why I think this piece of work is so crucial, is because enthusiasm alone doesn't always lead to people being able to get involved. there's a lot of enthusiasm often to get involved, but people don't know how to. People don't have the right information, they don't have the right tools, they don't have the time. There's a lot of things that people need in terms of capacity, and that can really help people to get involved. I used to say this quite often when we had our meetings at City Hall of the community-led housing sector, where you had people who were building co-ops or self-build or community housing, all sorts of different projects, and people came to these meetings with lots of ideas, and I said to them as a joke, which they appreciated, I said, look, if enthusiasm built homes, you guys would fix the housing crisis. You've got the ideas here. But what quite often happened is people said, but we don't really know how you buy land, or how do you borrow money, or who do I talk to in councils to get this sorted? And so what we tried to do at City Hall was to try and link up groups to educate each other, try to provide a bit of training and resource, try and make sure that people knew how to do it. And so for me, it's all very well having enthusiasm, people want to get involved. To make sure that really makes a difference, people need to be shown how to make a difference. People need access to that training and that capacity. And that's why this group coming together to try and draw on all that enthusiasm, draw on all these ideas, and make sure we have a really positive result out of it is so important. So, I just really want to wrap up by thanking you again for inviting me to be involved with this. I think it's something very close to my heart, not just because it's housing, but also because it's about involving the local community who I represent and who I want to make sure have a strong voice, but also it's about empowerment, and it's about making sure that people who otherwise may not get their voice heard by policymakers cannot be ignored.
Okay, thank you. Now, Clarissa, I can see you've got a question. I'm going to do questions at the end, but I'll let you do a very quick one, okay? And then we'll do questions at the end. You can.
Thank you for that. Thank you, because I do have to leave at 5 sharply today. I think more than a question, it's a comment, not just to the speaker, but to everyone in this group and yourself. I think we should have a Black-led housing association and or housing organisation like Inquilab or Westway Housing in this group. If we are talking about Black and ethnic minorities, then we certainly need the bigger players in the room, because if we don't, what we risk is other people stepping in on behalf of those bigger players and maybe misinterpreting or misperceiving the raw response. The other thing, so I know certainly of Inquilab, and I know the chief exec very well of Westway Housing. I could certainly invite him along if you want.
That'd be great.
Yep. And the other thing I would like to comment on, having and the Law Centre will know this, I have a long background with the Citizens Advice working with housing. Aside from the dense population in London and the working poor, we do have to look at the structural makeup of these buildings, which is predominantly 2-bedroom homes, 2-bedroom units, and the need is for 3 or more. And until we look at the structural issue around the unit allocations, i.e. BAME families by default often have more in their family, is that we just need more than 2-bedroom units everywhere. Those 2-bedroom units are made for investors and investors alone, and the market indicates that. The other thing that I would add is that anything that we do should be benchmarked or triangulated with the census, because that's the truest and most latest capture on the actual population, the resident population, because otherwise, how long is a piece of string? And I saw Vicky, you've just messaged something saying.
It was just that Hassel down in South and Lambeth, one of their major campaigning points is the point that you just made about the type of property.
Housing.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
the type of housing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just having been on the ground for so many years, Hammersmith, for example, you can consent to living in overcrowded conditions as long as you stay in the borough. That's holding people ransom. That's not necessarily around BAMEs per se, but I certainly think the whole, it's just a complete mismatch. What's being provided is not what's needed, and therein lies the problem. I'll shut up now.
No, some great points. Thank you, Clarissa. Really good. So now we're going to move on to Hebo, because she's had some, I've had a couple of chats with her, and she told me about some, and this goes down to, you know, a point you've made there about, that's really a great point about should be 3-bed, not 2-bed. And this relates to conversations I've had with Hebo about looking at policy and getting really specific, because it really helps focus on something and change policy. So that's why I thought maybe Hebo, she's from Hounslow Council, could talk about maybe some success stories, and it'd be great to sort of emulate this sort of success with Ealing as well. But yeah, Hebo, if you'd like to just kind of tell us about sort of the groups you work with and success stories.
So with Hounslow, so like I said earlier on, I do support a variety of resident association and small groups within the council, within the borough. When we discuss about the board and how the board can actually move forward and actually be effective in a way that you see action, you see change in policies, you see that people are not being held or blackmailed or held ransom and said you have to move in this 2-bedroom because you're in need of accommodation, and the council can only offer you 2-bedroom apartment. But bear in mind, the council is still, or both councils are still building multiple housing, number of housing in the borough, but they're all focusing 2 bedrooms. So they are, what we can say in a way that the councils are still not acknowledging the problem that, yes, you can encourage, you can ask for money from GLA and ask for support in building more housing in the boroughs. But the problem is this: the house that you're building now, are they suitable for the demographic or the number of residents who are in the list waiting to go in the housing? So that's one of the issues that I think the board will look into. So one of these let's say a panel that is acknowledged by the council and how in Hounslow, it's a very mouthful, it's TLSTACC. So it's tenants, leaseholder and sheltered resident joint consultative committee. So what we have a group of residents who are within their own right a member of the different forums, so tenants, leaseholder and sheltered. They do sit in that panel, and it's chaired by lead member of housing and vice chaired by the director of housing in Hounslow. So that panel kind of gives the resident a say in changing policy. So for repair policy, fire policy, fire assessment policy, void and letting policy. And what they say is, the system did not work. How can we change it to fit residents' need? Make it easy for residents to actually not have 200-page of application for resident asking for transfer from one property to another property. So they are participating, and we're encouraging them to have a say in that. So what when me and Toby and I, when we were speaking about this board, my concern was how can we encourage the board to both of the council, Hounslow and Ealing, to see that the policies that are now in action are not really fit for purpose, and how can we participate into those policies, and how can we put residents, especially Black and ethnic minority residents, in a way that we can encourage them to understand the law, to understand the policy, to understand that having a dumb-ridden admin with a disabled child is not okay. How can they afford to say this is not okay, and how can this be? Can we change this? So one of the success story that I've supported in Hounslow is in change of repair policy. So what we had like a group of task and finish group. So we were given the repair report that the council was working with. And when we went through the repair report, when the resident and myself supporting them, we sat down and say, how is it the repair that is now in action not fit for purpose? How can we change it? So we went through the entire booklet to just say this is still in the book since 1950. This does not fit. Should not be in the book. So when we went back, sent our recommendation to the lead member of housing and the director of resident service, the repair policy were changed to fit and to accommodate residents' concerns. So that was one of the recent, before COVID-19, that was the task, and we were given a task and we succeeded in producing a huge recommendation, which we're very happy that council actually listened to the resident and formulate like an action plan. So my question or my support to this group is how can I help to, let's say, have a tunnel vision? What is it that we want to achieve, and how can we achieve it? And who is it there within both council that we can work close with and help us change those policies?
Brilliant, thank you. It's really interesting insight. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Right, now we're going to move on to, so we do have some training already planned, and I will send out all the links because all this training is focused and specifically for either community organisations or individuals, so to do with housing. So we've already got plans, and I can send out the links. You might have seen it already that there's one planned coming up on the 10th of September about digital marketing to help people raise their profile. There's another session, 14th of September, corporate fundraising. And we will be doing, like I said, with the survey to find out more about the needs from individual, tenants and residents associations and also community groups. But we do have a session also planned on the 2nd of October, another Zoom one. And Jason's going to be delivering that, and that's about conducting and facilitating community consultations. And Jason's also going to be doing some other training in the future, but I just thought it'd be really interesting to hear from Jason about his insight and experience in this. So yeah, over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Toby. Yeah, I joined the voluntary sector in 2002 from a career working in the private sector in the commercial end, so working in sales and marketing, contract management and so on. And I decided on the career change just because I was fed up of earning lots of money for other people who didn't really appreciate the fact that I was earning them lots of money, and wanted to do something that was just a bit more feeding the soul rather than just feeding the pocket. And I took on this particular position, which was to support an initiative called the Market Towns Initiative. It was funded through an old government quango called the Countryside Agency, and it was an initiative really to go out to try and re-establish the role of market towns in their rural setting, because over years they've been eroded. People living in the country tended not to go to their local small town or large village. They tended to go off to sort of bigger urban areas to go and do their shopping and to support the economies there. So it was a bit of an economic program, and it started with a very broad mandate, a very broad remit, which was go and talk to the community and tell them, ask them rather, what it is they want, what we should be doing to support them, how can we reinvigorate these market towns. And the first part of that initiative was to go out and to ask those questions. So I sat there with my commercial background, scratching my head going, okay, never done anything like this before, what do we do? Baptism of fire. So I went back and I looked at things I'd done in the past around market research and looked at some of my old business books and thought, surely there must be some inspiration there. And one of the few business books I've ever put credit to was In Search of Excellence, which was an academic research back in the 80s looking into what made excellent organisations. And one of the key features of an excellent organisation was staying close to your customer. And that really made me think, well, actually, you know what, I've done a lot of this before. I've gone out and spoken to customers, people that we're looking at delivering services for. And I took a lot of those principles and really applied them in doing this community consultation. So the geographical area that I worked in was a place called Romney Marsh. I don't know if anyone knows it. It's down on the south coast of Kent, on the border with East Sussex. It's very rural, coastal as well. Population of about 21,000 people, so it's not big. The geographical area is 100 square miles. And I thought, okay, lots of people dispersed over 17 different communities that historically don't talk to one another. How are we going to reach out? What are we going to do? And I spoke to local people with local intelligence who knew the area, to just co-design with them an approach to it. And what we did over the time was we ran a series of community. We identified who we wanted to target, first of all. And then what we did was we put a program together on how we would reach out and engage with them. And we simply looked at those people we wanted to target, worked out how best to approach them, and we worked with their requirements. So we wanted to engage young people. So we thought, are they going to come to a fun day in the community? No. Are they going to take part in an online survey? No, probably not. So what do we need to do? Well, let's start with school. And again, that's great, that gets a proportion, but actually how are we going to get those that are disaffected, that are actually not attending school? Well, maybe we work with the Prues, maybe we work with the community Bobby, if there was one in those days. And we literally just ran a program of events, and we really varied the approaches that we took. Because actually for different groups, there was no one fit that worked for all of them. But I'm just going to finish off with telling you about one little anecdote, which was great. We wanted to engage working age parents. And I was employed pretty much 9 to 5. So when I was working, they were also working. So it was really hard to get in touch with them. So we decided to do something a bit creative. And we hired in an artificial ice rink. And it turned up a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. It was plastic jigsaw puzzle bits that all joined together. And in the end, we had quite a decent sized ice rink. And we promoted it through the school book bags because we knew that it was going to the kids, who were then taking it home and giving it to the parents. And we then thought, well, actually, rather than giving it away for free, why don't we try and make it a break-even project? So we charged the kids for coming and ice skating. But of course, all the parents want to come and see their kids ice skating. Now, remembering this is an area where the nearest ice rink is about 50 miles away. So all the parents came along. We were mob-handed at the event, and we literally went around and we spoke to 400 people at that one event. And the money that we got in from selling, the slots on the ice rink, we actually made a profit of £50 on a community consultation event. Nobody walked away feeling that they were shortchanged. Nobody walked away because they had a great event. They had lots of fun. And they were really, because they're in a good mood, they were really forthcoming with their opinions about what was needed for the area. Off the back of that one event, we got 78 different themes that we wanted to explore with the community. And in the end, we narrowed that all down to about 58 individual projects that it was then my responsibility to take forward with funders and with lobbying and influencing and so on. So actually, there's room for creativity in community consultation. It doesn't all have to be a questionnaire or Survey Monkey or a little vox pop in the high street. There are loads of tools available, and it can be fun, and it can really invigorate a community, because through that program we got lots of people volunteering and wanting to get involved in the delivery of those projects. So it can really trigger a lot of activity, but it gives you the best insight into what an area needs. At that point, I'll stop, draw breath, and say thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing some of you at the training.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Jason. Really interesting. Right, Sufyan from Cash has been waiting very patiently. He just wants to speak for a couple of minutes, so I'm going to let him talk for about 3 minutes, and then I'm just looking at time, and then we're going to have some questions and answers to anyone. And I expect the questions are all going to be to James, not to me, but let's see. Okay, so we'll just give 3 minutes to Sufyan.
Yep. So as I said, I'm from Cash, Clean Air for Salford and Hayes. So just a bit about background about the campaign. So we're campaigning on against the site as we believe it's got very harmful chemicals on the ground and around. Ideally what we want to get out is Berkeley Group to erect an enclosure or with an air filtration system over the pockets of the land. The land's still being remediated because it's still got about 88 acres left to be remediated. And the subcontracted company Atkins, who have supposedly been doing their quality monitoring, we're not happy with their reports, because their reports have come back and they've not aligned with our private own air quality monitors we've put up, because we actually paid for private air quality monitoring. We put 4 monitors up, and they, on the exact same dates, at the exact same times, Atkins' report went up. We looked at our records and they didn't align. Just about the site, they've got about so there's in total private housing, and also there are social housing, but there's only is 120 affordable housing units. The remaining 66 of that is shared ownership. And then there's another 3,750 units which are private. And obviously to come to Southall and build that many units, and then only a very small percentage is affordable or shared ownership, it is quite hard. And that's another reason why we are campaigning against it, because we don't believe that obviously the air quality hasn't been correct according to our knowledge, because the scientists we hired from Centric Lab, she's put out in the public domain all the monitoring and stuff, and that the science doesn't add up according to Atkins to ours. So yeah, but yeah, thanks for letting me speak.
That's quite worrying. The readings of the chemicals seeping out and things, quite alarming.
And the chemicals like naphthalene and benzene, so they're not even like minor chemicals. These chemicals can cause cancer, and we know they've caused cancer. Because obviously, as I mentioned before, over 4 or 5 people just within our small organization, just within our small organization, we've got 4 or 5 members who actually have caught cancer, or who have lost people to cancer, such as someone's mum passed away due to cancer, and she was fit and healthy up until the work started, and they've lived in South all their life, and she is adamant that Berkeley Root caused this cancer. But obviously, she can't definitely say that, but she's adamant. So
I see Vicky's gone and put a link to the Guardian article.
yeah,
Yes,
that's the
that
Guardian
is.
article, and there's
We
also
can.
we're also featured in My London. But if you just check out our WhatsApp, it's not WhatsApp, sorry, in Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's Clean Air and Southall and Hayes.
Yeah.
Clean Air, Southall and Hayes, on all social medias. So that's yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that insight. Very worrying. Okay, I'm going to open up for questions. We're already 1 minute plus 5. I expect James might have some other appointments coming up, but if he is able, I imagine most of the questions are going to be to him. But so yeah, we've got 5 or 10 minutes for questions. Am I right in thinking questions are for James? Do you want to just nod if they are? Yeah, looks like I was right. Okay, James, are you okay time-wise? Yeah. Okay, so who would like to start for a question for James? Okay, Yusuf, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I've been working with the local charity for a long time, and the tradition of healing cancer was to have a consultation with local issues. I'm not talking about before, I'm talking about before the austerity, long time, the tradition of healing cancer. And to my experience, when even the 32 barras, they were doing competition with any service provision, healing used to compete, either number 2, number 3, that's how it was scoring. But things, the austerity or the cut, things went out of hand. We never have to have survey, we never have to have questionnaire as used to be, and we never used to have a proper consultation with the local representative. And when I talk to local representative, it varies with black and ethnic minorities. That's what I'm talking, especially in Ealing. Now I'm asking the MB that he seems to have experience in Ealing, and he seems to be youthful. Because before I ask him the question is, when you go to the MB, usually with an issue, usually says he refers you to the councillors. When you go to the councillors, they come in aside the green for hall. Each one is allocated to 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Issues are huge. You won't get even the coverage you want. So I'm asking the young MB now, what is his views regarding consultation with overcrowding? And in this specific question, I think he's aware there was a one death, a child with specific with special needs who died in Acton town during the COVID period. And that family, we have been dealing with them before, with the overcrowding issue before the COVID. 6 people living in 2 bedrooms. We were having a struggle with that family before the COVID. You can check with the Ealing Council. And then that child, he ran away from the home, just ran straight into the Ealing town, Acton town station, and went to the live fire and died there. And then there was complicity. There was COVID. The family never knew language. And then there are two opposite parents of very extended family. Then you have to go with the police case. You have to go with the social services. We have to go with this thing. We have to go after the corona to get the guy, the child out of the service profession with the household and into the system. That is a huge task to be done by a small organization. So what is his views regarding with all the issues he talked about the overcrowding issues in Ealing Council? That is my interest.
Okay, James?
Do you want me to come straight back, or do you want to take 2 or 3 questions together and then?
Do you want to come straight back with that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so Yusuf, I mean, overcrowding, is one of the housing problems that we face, which has the biggest impact on everyone affected, but particularly young people who are affected by it. Young people are growing up in overcrowding, and as they become teenagers or even young adults, not able to have their own space at home, not able to have somewhere to study, sometimes sleeping, sharing a bedroom with other people, sleeping in the living room and so on. It has such a huge impact on people's lives. And as I said earlier, we've all known this to be the case for many years. COVID has made it even more urgent and apparent, because if if you're being told to work from home, or children are being asked to study from home whilst the schools were suspended, to study from overcrowded home as a young person is very different than studying from a spacious home where you've got your own bedroom and a good broadband connection and so on. It brings all of that really out in public, for everyone in public to see. When people I had some surgeries before COVID started. We've been doing them all online or telephone since then. Overcrowding is probably one of the most upsetting issues, I think, to talk to people about, because it affects people so personally, and yet as an MP you feel very powerless to help that individual person, because we all know all the pressure there is on the housing which is available. There's a certain amount I can do in terms of making sure that people are getting the right number of the right priority in terms of housing allocations system, to make sure that people know how to bid, to make sure they're thinking about all their options. So there are bits that I can do as an MP around the edges, but I think there is no getting away from the fact that the answer to this in the medium and long run is just to build a lot more family-sized council and social housing in Ealing. Yeah, that is the only way we're going to get around this in the long run, because whether it's me or whether it's a councillor, all we're really able to do is help around the edges, as I say, to make sure people have got the right priority and know how to bid and taking all the options they can. As an MP, and I hope I'll have support from many people in this group, what I think we should be pushing for nationally is to make sure we're having a lot more investment in council and social housing, and making sure we're getting that family-sized housing built in Ealing, because unless we have that, there's no solution to this. There's no other solution to it in the long run.
Hi, can I quickly follow
Annabelle,
up?
yep.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Annabelle. I've actually already introduced myself. I work with families, specifically Somali family, who are suffering with mental health. And Somali community in England and Wales are actually the biggest sort of Black and ethnic minority in the whole of the UK. We are particularly suffering in predominantly more complex issues across mental health, disability, drug and alcohol, and housing in general, because it literally goes hand in hand. My question is to James, and I want to just sort of say that coronavirus did happen just now, and coronavirus has become the biggest revealer of all of the disparities against communities, especially BAME communities. But you just basically just mentioned that there is a plan to do housing, because we know that the stock that the councils have is not actually sufficient for the communities that they serve. That is actually just a fact anyways. There is no excuse for that. But what is the short time situation? Because there is actually a short time, sort of a medium time and a long time plan that you should actually be having. What is exactly the short time? Because right now we need help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what it comes down to, I can be very blunt about this. It depends who's in government, and it depends who's in government nationally, who's in government at City Hall, and who's in government locally in the council. So, I know that council, so just to wind back 2 years when I was at City Hall, we launched a new programme there, which hadn't been done before, but was something which was a real passion of mine. And the programme was called, had a very simple name, which tells you what it did, which is Building Council Homes for Londoners. And the idea there was to say the first call on a big chunk of this money that we managed to get off government should be on building new council housing. Now, it was incredibly successful in terms of the number of people, the number of councils applying for that money, which really showed me how much demand there was from councils to build council housing. They just need the money, they want to get on with it. And actually Ealing was one of the top boroughs in terms of how many homes they promised to build under the programme. So they were right up there at the top. So that was really good in terms of Ealing accessing that money. If you look at how many council homes that programme built in its first year, so this is 2019-20, so a couple of years ago, it built around 2,000 council homes. Now that's up from almost zero a few years ago, because it went right down very low, and this is then bringing up 2,000. But if you compare to how many council homes were being built at the peak of council home building in the 1970s in London, there was about 20,000 council homes a year being built. So we're building, although 2,000 is, you know, a record in terms of recent years, if you go back and look at the longer, you know, several decades, only a few decades ago, we were building 10 times as many council homes back then. So, you know, I don't want to make this too political, but I can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is with this government, we're not going to get money for council housing on the scale that we need. And that's why my job, bluntly, is to get them out.
Yeah. Steve, I can see you got your hand up, but Shelley's just messaged me earlier saying she wants to speak, so we'll come back to you, Steve.
That's fine.
But Shelley, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Toby. If I just may, there's so much that has come out of this session today. It's really so, I mean, we can see, obviously, the level of problem that this has is causing in society. If I just, two important points though, in relation to what gentleman from Cash said, and also what Mr. Murray was explaining. I really do think that we have got to now in this country rethink nationally, because Mr. Murray mentioned nationally, he's obviously an MP sitting in Parliament. If he can, you know, raise it, campaign for it, the 88% landmass that is fields, surely we've got to question that why is that not some of it coming available to build homes? We can't just keep increasing the density in the towns. As the gentleman from Cash has said, the problems that the density in Southall is creating amongst community relations is horrific, and that's another scandal waiting to happen. Additionally, the shared ownership, that's another scandal waiting to happen, because a lot of the housing associations, they might be charitable, they might be not for profit, but they operate like businesses, and the share and the amount of share that they retain, because people can't afford to purchase outright, you know, they're not going to be left with any sort of pension arrangement that often people do purchase or invest in property for. And locally, if I may say, Mr. Murray, I'm really, forgive me, but policy councillors they have a lot of power to form local policies through SPDs, and you know, that actually meet the needs of local people. And I'm afraid, for example, in Southall, which is highly ethnic, and where BAME communities have been identified that one of the reasons that they're suffering poor health is because of housing, where councillors from our own community have just ignored the needs of people from the BAME communities, and the consequences have been all too visible through the COVID pandemic. You know, so I'm afraid that it's not, you know, if politicians, they put themselves forward for positions of power, they do have duties to observe. And really, they can make local policies that meet the needs for local people. That's what councils are there for. And they just haven't. And now we are reaping those unfortunate issues because of that, you know, complete oversight. Thank you.
Well, I'm going, just building on that, I have invited Councillor Peter Mason, who's involved in housing, so hopefully I'd love him to attend our community advisory board. I'm just aware of time. I've got two people with their hands up. I've got Steve and someone from Elais, and then we better wrap up then because we have run over quite a lot. So Steve.
Okay, I was just going to mention, and I understand the sort of the broad three categories that James was talking about in terms of the different housing crises, if you like, because what we actually have is multiple housing crises, not a single generic one. However, the one large part of the, shall we say, the property owning, the landlord bank that wasn't touched upon until Shelley mentioned there really is the registered social landlords. Now, there are a couple of major issues that do relate to that. One is, for example, that in a lot of the recent redevelopment of housing stock, it has actually been a movement from local authority to housing association stock. And those redevelopments, by and large, have not replaced like for like, in the sense of, you know, the people who are living in those estates being able to stay in those estates. They've also potentially penalised those who were at the risk of getting political, shall we say, optimistic rather than foolish enough to indulge in right to buy. They've ended up with having leases which they're not getting sufficient compensation for and this is not, I'm not looking at it as a particularly Ealing problem, but sufficient compensation to allow them to be rehoused where they are currently housed. But there's also quite a big issue in that certainly the larger registered social landlords have, whilst not being profit-making, have quite substantial surpluses. Yet their tenants really do struggle to get a decent repair services from a lot of them. Quite a lot have taken the approach of having a per unit budget, which means they'll say that over a given period we'll only spend a maximum of £1,400, whatever it is. I'm just plucking figures out of the air, which means that whenever people have essential repairs that exceed what someone has arbitrarily budgeted per property, things take a long time. But by and large, I mean, there are lots of websites out there, including some directly connected to our largest local housing associations, which are solely aimed at providing a forum for people to complain about the repairs not being done. Now, there is no, if one looks at people's surpluses, which are generated through sales and some of it is generated through rents, is it actually reasonable? And I don't know if our housing association colleague is still in the room, but is it actually reasonable for you to be generating those surpluses when people's houses are in disrepair? I think that's an issue. I think getting some sort of professional and support in place for residents associations, and particularly when there are redevelopments, because almost always redevelopments end up with a lot of these satisfied customers, and I appreciate that that's always likely to be the case. You can't satisfy everyone. I think there's also an issue about current build standards. Having supported people in a lot of the quite new, recently built accommodation, one does not think that that is going to last as long as some of the traditionally built that they're going for. And I think it's quite interesting that the National House Builders Association give a 12-year guarantee on a new property. I mean, what we're actually saying to people is you can spend £400,000 on a one-bedroom flat in Ealing, but it's only guaranteed to stand up for 12 years. That's a very interesting concept, I think, in terms of you know, people standing by the work that they're delivering. But I think there are real questions. And as I said, I did a lot of lettings in Ealing 25 to 30 years ago when I first started working in West London, and quite a lot of those estates are looking incredibly ropey, and some of them are basically being replaced. And I think that there's a question that needs to be asked about what we're building as well as where we're building it. There's also vast issues about space standards, even more for private accommodation, for private sale than there is for ourselves. So I think there's quite a lot of stuff around the role of registered social landlords in all of this.
Okay, some great points there. We're going to finish up with delays, but remember there is going to be, I'd love people to join the Community Advisory Board. There will be future meetings when we can discuss these things further. But Elise, would you like to put your point forward?
Hi, it's Hippo from Elise.
Oh, hello there.
Hi, Elise was here for the last 16 years, and we work with the PME communities, mostly from the Somali community. And I just want to highlight the plight of the community, not only Somalis, but the whole of most of the PME communities. And we talked about many different issues, but the issue that we always see are families and disabled people that live in private rented accommodation, and they usually live in unmaintained properties, or sometimes they are facing antisocial behavior. And if they want to complain, they have no access to legal aid. And small organizations that are grassroots like us, it takes so much of our time, dealing with cases that deal with housing. And I'm just, glad to be part of this group today.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I got a message, Shamaki, we're going to finish on. He's going to tell us about, he said, housing, there's a campaign on housing issues. So it'd be great to hear it now, and then we better wrap it up. Okay, so Shamaki.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a case at the moment that James has, I've copied him a few times. He's also supporting the family. Now there's with the Locality Act 2011, Vicky I think is here, so she knows more about the law side of things. So what's happened is 3 sisters whose fathers passed away from COVID were asked to move from the council property where they were living because of the change of law, which is so with the Locality Act 2011, the succession can only go to a spouse. It cannot go to the children. So GOSAD has decided. So this is going to be, so we are, I kind of put a complaint to the council, and we are dealing with some of the leaders of the council, and also the MP, James, is helping on this. So we want to use that as a campaign, because apparently Ealing does not apply discretion on such cases, which is very odd because some other local authorities are able to apply discretion. So we're going to use this as a campaign. And if everybody can join, and I'll be able to articulate maybe another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big issue because, you have kids who, probably are going to be made homeless.
Okay, well, I'm going to wrap this meeting up, but please, everyone, I will send around the links to join the site on our website, the Slack site, and then you can all talk to each other and share resources, and then you can invite other people, and we can grow this project, involve more people. And I will be organising dates with James for the Community Advisory Board. And I'll be sharing those. But I just want to say thank you very much for joining, everyone. It was really interesting. Great to see some familiar faces, and great to see some new people as well. And also, James, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And look forward to seeing you all again soon.